Welcome to Weather Extra. I'm meteorologist Jillian Johnson. We are in the peak of hurricane season, and that was a very true statement this past week. At one point, we had 5 named storms churning in the Atlantic: Franklin, Gert, Idalia, Jose, and Katia. Only 2 of those storms, Franklin and Idalia, would bring impacts on land last week. Take a look. First, we had Hurricane Franklin, which became the 8th named storm and the first major hurricane of the Atlantic season. Franklin impacted Hispaniola as a tropical storm before strengthening into a high-end Category 4 hurricane several days later, but thankfully remained in the Atlantic and brought no threat to the United States. We then had Idalia form right after Franklin. Now, unlike Franklin, Idalia would move on land and bring devastating impacts across the southeastern United States, including Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Idalia will become the 2nd major hurricane of the season, delivering destructive winds, catastrophic storm surge, flash flooding, and tornadoes too. For now, let's focus on Idalia. That's going to be the major weather story of the past week. We turn to CNN's Ivan Rodriguez, who shows us some of the damage Idalia left behind.
Tropical storm Idalia tearing a path across the southeast.
It was quite a storm. It was a bad one.
Pummeling Georgia and the Carolinas with high winds, torrential rain, and flash flooding Wednesday night into Thursday morning. After slamming Florida's Big Bend Wednesday as a Category 3 hurricane.
These are all little old school Florida villas, and they were just picked up and carried into the Gulf.
Downing trees, tearing roofs off buildings, and flooding homes as the sea surged onto shore, leaving entire communities underwater.
Crystal River was decimated. We had 8 feet of storm surge come inside of City Hall.
The damage likely changing some of those communities forever.
There are some communities that may never look the same, and others that will get rebuilt that will look slightly different. And so, look, this is a life-changing event.
Some residents left shaken.
It's pretty rough. We never seen anything like it before.
And heartbroken.
And it hurt because I raised my kids up in this trailer.
As the storm moves offshore, the extent of the damage can be assessed and the journey to recovery can begin.
I was really sad, and I'm trying not to get emotional, but, this is a beautiful town. The people are wonderful, and I hate seeing my people go through something like this.
We now bring in meteorologist Sean Bellafury, who has more details on Idalia's landfall along Florida's Big Bend region. Sean.
All eyes this past week were on Hurricane Idalia making landfall as a Category 3 hurricane along Florida's Big Bend in a region that has never seen in recorded history, all the way back to 1851, a major hurricane make landfall. Now, we're going to talk about one of the reasons why Idalia weakened from a Category 4 storm to a Category 3 just before landfall in a couple of moments, but I want to take you through the particulars. Made landfall near Keaton Beach just around 6:45 Wednesday morning with winds of 125 miles per hour. And even though the strongest winds with the system were confined to a very dense or sparsely populated region of Florida, look at some of these rainfall totals even away from the center of circulation. Tampa, Sarasota, down to Fort Myers and inland, even up to Orlando. Rainfall estimates were anywhere from about 4 to 8+ inches of rain. And just look at the rainfall footprint stretching from just where the center moved ashore all the way up into North Carolina, this widespread swath of anywhere from 4 to 8 inches with bullseyes. Look at this, just next to Waycross, Georgia, 11.4 inches. Just near Statesboro, Georgia, 8.2 inches. This was a prolific rainfall maker, and honestly, some of the worst rainfall actually fell in the Carolinas, north of Myrtle Beach and Wilmington, a nice swath of 9 to 12-inch radar estimated rainfall totals. Now, here is the system on approach, hugging the coast close enough that we can pick it up by radar. But remember, this system weakened just a little bit before moving ashore. There is the eye, but notice that drier air that's working into the eye wall and those brighter colors away from the eye wall. This system was undergoing an eye wall replacement cycle, which typically helps to weaken those systems. That happened just before landfall, which is, of course, good news. But unfortunately, the Gulf cannot catch a break. Since 2017, there have been 8 major landfalling hurricanes. Florida has seen 4 of them. Reporting in the studio, Sean Bellafury, KWTX News 10.
Well, thank you, Sean. Recovering from Idalia might not cost as much as it has with similar hurricanes. That's according to a preliminary estimate from Moody's Analytics. It says Idalia could end up costing between $12 and $20 billion in damage and lost output. Compare that to last year's Hurricane Ian, which hit Florida and racked up more than $112 billion in damage. Moody's says it helped that Idalia made landfall in Florida's less populated Big Bend region and also passed through quickly. And Idalia has the potential to join a notorious list of ice storms, now retired because of their extremely devastating and deadly impacts. When a storm name is retired, it is removed from the official name list that used by the National Hurricane Center and can't be used again in any given ocean. In the Atlantic Ocean, 96 storm names have been retired since 1954. Of those, 14 were ice storms. That's the most retired of any letter. 12 of the 14 ice storm names have been retired in the last 22 years, including 2022's Hurricane Ian, 2021 Hurricane Ida, and 2020 Hurricane Iota. All were very deadly storms with between 80 to 150 deaths. Ice storms often form when the season has reached its peak activity level. One of the biggest and deadliest impacts from a hurricane is storm surge. That rush of water can quickly devour lives and property. CNN's Randy Kay has more on the devastation previous storm surges have brought to the nation.
This is what it's like in downtown New Orleans right now.
It's hard to estimate how much water that is.
In August 2005, Hurricane Katrina barreled into the Louisiana coast. The storm was a powerful Category 3 hurricane when it made landfall with winds near 127 miles per hour. But what made Katrina so deadly wasn't so much the wind as the water.
I tried swimming to higher ground, but there was no higher ground.
According to the National Hurricane Center, storm surge flooding measured 10 to 28 feet above normal tide levels. The storm surge that poured into Lake Pontchartrain breached the levee system, flooding most of New Orleans. Catastrophic flooding spread for miles inland, destroying residential neighborhoods.
It came in so fast. It was from 1 inch to about 10 feet in a matter of 10 minutes.
Nearly 1,400 people perished during the hurricane and the floods that followed, most of them drowned. Katrina is a prime example of how deadly a storm surge can be. In 2008, Hurricane Ike made landfall as it swept over Galveston Island on the Texas coast. It was a Category 2 storm with maximum sustained winds of 110 miles per hour. Much of the area saw devastating storm surges of 15 to 20 feet above normal tide levels.
The ocean came through the house. It literally came through the house. There's sludge and snakes and you name it.
Years earlier, in 1995, Hurricane Opal made landfall near Pensacola Beach, Florida, as a Category 3 storm. Again, the story was the storm surge.
Totally gone. We didn't do anything but lock the door on our way out.
With Opal, the storm surge spanned about 120 miles from Pensacola Beach to Mexico Beach. That surge, combined with breaking waves, soaked portions of the Florida Panhandle's coast with water as deep as 10 to 20 feet. The maximum storm tide, which combines storm surge and regular astronomical tides, was 24 feet, recorded near Fort Walton Beach. Hurricane Hugo made landfall as a Category 4 storm in September 1989, just north of Charleston, South Carolina. Records show sustained winds reaching 120 miles per hour in some areas. And the storm surge? It soaked the South Carolina coast, with maximum storm tides of 20 feet observed in some areas.
The wind is picking up so dramatically.
There was no water, and then the eye hit. And when the eye hit, it was just like filling up a bathtub. There was no wave, there was no nothing. It just like in about 10 minutes.
Decades ago, in 1969, it was Camille, a Category 5 hurricane that made landfall along the Mississippi coast. The winds were so fierce, they destroyed all the wind recording instruments in the area.
What now? I don't know, start over again. I got the clothes I got on and $22 in my pocket.
The winds at the coast were estimated to be about 200 miles per hour. And with those winds came water, lots of it. A storm tide of 24.6 feet occurred at Pass Christian, Mississippi, according to officials. Randy Kay, CNN, Palm Beach County, Florida.
Well, switching gears, we finally switched our calendars over and are now into the month of September. September 1st marks the start to meteorological fall. Now, the astronomical start to fall is actually on September 23rd, which is only 19 days away. Now that we're in a new month, let's look back at what the month of August brought us. If you spent any time outside throughout the month of August, you know it was brutally hot. 28 out of the 31 days last month featured temperatures at or above 100 degrees at the Waco Regional Airport. We even had 2 days where thermometers reached 110 degrees. The average high for the month of August was 104.7 degrees. That is actually the second hottest month of August that we've ever had on record. The normal average high is 97.1 degrees. We were more than 7 degrees warmer than we should have been last month. We could barely escape the heat because our mornings were also very warm throughout the month of August too. There were 14 mornings where the day started at or above 80 degrees. We also know that we struggled in the rain department. We only had 1 day with measurable rain in August. Just above 3/10 of an inch of rain fell at the Waco Regional Airport a week ago, back on the 27th. That day of rain finally put an end to the longest streak on record without any rainfall at the Waco Regional Airport. We went 56 long days without rain falling. You have to go back to July 1st when only trace amounts of rain fell. So from July 2nd through August 26th, we didn't see a single drop of rain. Weather Extra will be right back. Welcome back to Weather Extra. The high school football season officially kicked off 2 weeks ago. Many area teams have been dealing with the brutal heat and have had to either move practice times around, not practice at all, and even change the time of their games. We know about standard temperature and heat index, but 2 Texas school districts are using a different method to measure outdoor conditions to keep students safe during this heat. It's called wet bulb globe temperature. Connor Bean has more.
Both Bryan and College Station ISD are not taking any chances to keep students safe while they're outdoors.
Regardless of how you feel, we have to protect our kids. And so we're not going to go out and practice and put our kids at risk if we can avoid it.
District officials say unlike the heat index, wet bulb globe temperature gives a more in-depth picture of what it actually feels like outside, measuring traits in the environment like wind speeds, ambient temperature, relative humidity, and solar radiation.
The heat index doesn't really get a accurate picture of the heat stress on the body. So by moving to this and using this, we're in a better position to protect our athletes and our students that participate in other outdoor activities.
Just to show how it's measured, I went out around 11:30 this morning where the wet bulb globe temperature was around 82. A little over an hour later, it jumped up to 91 and was less than a point away from the district stopping outdoor activities.
It's been so hot for a long period of time that most days we are exceeding what our threshold is, which would prevent us from being able to work out outside.
Now districts across the state have taken notice and is now recommended by UIL to use wet bulb globe temperature and plans to use it for the foreseeable future.
The standard across the state has moved in this direction, and I think that's a very positive thing.
Connor Bean, News 3.
And one school district in North Texas is finding another way to keep their student athletes safe in this heat, and it seems fairly easy to do. Take a look.
When the Friday night lights come on, the Poteet High School football team will be ready. Other districts like Dallas have a no-fly zone policy, meaning they can't practice in sweltering heat. Coach Rodney McLean knows the feeling.
Every fall going into the season, we have missed about 22 to 25 practices because of heat, and this will change everything.
The new pavilion is between 20 and 22 degrees cooler than the actual temperature.
You still have a breeze that blows through and kind of cools the kids off. You can feel it right now. You look outside, there's no trees moving, but underneath here you can feel the breeze.
And it's not just for football. It can be converted for soccer, baseball, volleyball, and more. It's also a fine arts facility. The marching band has already started practicing here.
We can come out here and we have a full 100-yard football field in order to participate, work on drill for the shows.
Coach McLean is looking forward to the advantage the pavilion will provide competitively.
People always talk about you want kids to practice in the heat because they're going to play in the heat. Well, yes and no. You also want to have kids prepared to where they're hydrated going into a ball game. Okay, so that in of itself is an advantage.
But he says it goes far deeper than winning. His father, a fellow coach, died of a heat-related heart attack at work. He says this investment by the district illustrates a commitment to safety for everyone.
When I look at my coaches also, I want to make sure that they're taken care of. And I cannot express how much difference this is going to make for kids and coaches alike.
Well, Brady Taylor joins us next on Weather Extra with this week's Degrees of Science. Stick with us.
Well, welcome into this week's Degrees of Science. You know, it's been a pretty bad summer with heat and drought and all kinds of issues like that. But one thing we may not think of is how this hot and dry weather impacts bees. Well, I've got an interesting product I want to tell you about, and we're going to introduce you to Jen Rose. She is the designer and creator of bee cups. So, Jen, tell us, what exactly are bee cups?
Bee cups are tiny porcelain cups that collect a teaspoon of water for thirsty bees and butterflies, and you just simply put them in your garden, and every time you water your plants, it fills up with just a little bit of water to hold in the environment a little bit longer, because water is super important to bees as well as nectar from flowers.
So they're beautiful. Y'all sent me a couple of them, and they look really, really nice. So what, now your background, you're an artist. What went from being an artist to creating something like this for bees?
So I consider myself an ecological artist, and I'm always inspired by things around me. And so I started doing some research about insects and how they, what they need and how important they are to our environment. And I ended up combining my history with porcelain and with glaze chemistry into a product that hopefully is beneficial to bees. I think it is, you know, it allows bees to have a little bit of a fighting chance in the middle of this hot weather.
So you're talking about learning about those and all the research you did. For people that may not know, how important are bees to us and our ecosystem and for most all of our foods and stuff like that?
It's amazing. And it's not just the honeybees. It's there are so many native bees that are important to our ecosystem as well. But bees pollinate about 1/3 of all the food that we eat. So all of the vegetables, all of the fruits, all of this is very important. And if we didn't have the bees in our ecosystem, it would really collapse. They're the backbone of our food supply.
So you're talking about your bee cups providing water for these bees. Why is the hot and dry weather so bad on the bees right now?
Bees are smart little animals, and so they have developed ways to survive. Everything that's living needs water, but they also use water for other reasons. For example, there are specialized bees that go out, they drink water, and then they bring it back to their hive and spray it on their hive, and then other specialized bees will flap their wings to create evaporative cooling. So just like humans, bees can overheat, and the water is important for them to be able to control the temperature of their hive, the temperature of their queen, and the temperature of their the eggs that they lay.
So you not only made something that's really pretty and kind of, you know, mimics the look of a flower, and people aren't going to see this in the video, but tell us about the ultraviolet ceramic glaze that you invented for these.
Right. So I have some right here, and hopefully we can see this. But I have a background in glaze chemistry, so I developed a glaze, and I'm not sure how well it's showing up here, that glows under a black light. And that's important because bees have different kind of vision than we do. So bees see in UV color and see on the UV spectrum. And the fascinating thing is that flowers have developed UV colors and patterns to tell the bees where to go. So those UV colors and patterns create a bullseye or a target so that bees know exactly where to find their food source. And the bee cups mimic that. So it catches the bees' attention and they're able to find the water source a little bit easier.
Tell us about how the other stuff you did, like with the texturing inside to make it where it's just like a flower for these bees.
Yeah, so a couple of things. The bees need, they have little toes on their back feet. It's kind of like little hooks. And bees will hang on to the texture on the inside of the bee cup. The cups are not glazed completely, so that they have some grippy stuff. It's like a little bath mat for bees so they don't slip and fall. There's also this center mound in the center that gives them a little bit of texture if they need to climb back out. And generally, it's just small enough for bees to get a drink of water, but not big enough for mosquitoes to breed. So the bee cup actually holds about half as much water as mosquitoes need to have us to breed and be successful with their eggs. So these both help the bees, but don't help mosquitoes.
Welcome back to Weather Extra. According to a report published by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, West Nile virus continues to be the leading cause of viral disease spread by insects in the United States. The report says in 2021, 49 states and the District of Columbia reported more than 3,000 cases of the arboviral disease. Nearly all of those cases were West Nile virus. Close to 2,100 people with West Nile were actually hospitalized and 227 died. Nationally, the incidence rate of neuroinvasive West Nile virus disease, meaning the infection affects the nervous system, was the highest since 2012. This year, the CDC says a total of 455 West Nile cases have been reported across 36 states, and that number is growing. Now, across the state of Texas, 24 out of the 254 counties have reported cases of West Nile this year. One of those counties is Bell County. The first positive case was reported back in the month of August. While the chances of you getting the disease are pretty low, they aren't zero. Health experts say even the smallest amount of standing water around your home can become a mosquito breeding ground.
Because it only takes a little bit of stagnant water. So things like when you water your flower plants, if there's water that's your flower pots and there's water standing, that can attract mosquitoes. If you have gutters that you haven't cleaned out, even if there's just a little bit of water in the bottom of your gutters, that can attract them.
The Bell County Health District recommends following the 3 Ds. Defend by using repellents, dress in long, loose-fitting clothing when outside, especially at dusk and dawn, and drain all standing water around your home. Well, that's all we have for you for this week's show. We'll see you back here again next weekend for another half hour of nothing but weather and science. Have a great week.